I'm Dr. Duke with the New American, and I'm happily joined today by Leah Southwell. Leah is a coordinator for the John Birch Society. Her territories include Colorado, parts of Montana, South Dakota, and Wyoming. Leah, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Duke.
Well, one of the hot button talking points for the John Birch Society now, calls to action, is to continue to fight the con. The Society has been the number one organization for the last 50 years that is trying to push back against the con. In fact, if it weren't for the John Birch Society, I am 100% sure we already would have had a very dangerous constitutional convention, and it wouldn't be just term limits rolled back. It would be First Amendment rights, Second Amendment rights. So this is a critical thing for us. Give us an update in the 4 states that you cover for the Society. What's going on with the con battle?
Well, Colorado, nothing is happening that I've heard of as of now, and that's because it's Democrat run right now. So they have their own calls for cons, but not the type that we've been traditionally fighting. So nothing's happening in Colorado. Wyoming, I'm very proud to say, nothing is happening because we have had a champion there for years, a long time, since the 1970s, Bircher legislator, who did his job and educated all the other legislators to the point that if conventions of the state were to come, the legislators would say, get out of our states. Sadly, he passed away just a couple of months ago from COVID. That was Roy Edwards, great Bircher. So that's credit to him on how you can keep it out of your state. Montana is super hot right now, and so is South Dakota. I'm playing whack-a-mole. Every time we whack it down, it pops back up in another form again. So it's been rough. Montana, we beat it in committee. I'm trying to remember. I get these all mixed up, whether it was House or Senate. It was House. We beat it in the House State Affairs Committee. And it was dead, and they tabled it. And tabled means that it just gets set aside, and they could always pull it out. In Montana, it's called blasting it out. Well, just yesterday, it was blasted out of committee, and so it goes to the floor. I'm sorry, it was a Senate bill, so it's now to the Senate floor. Even though it was killed in committee, it's back again. So now we're fighting it. It could be today is the hearing. So it just doesn't matter that we kill it; it just keeps coming back. Same thing happened in South Dakota. We killed it in the House. And they even it's called sending it to the 41st day, which there is none, so it is killed and dead. And they brought it back instead of the House. They brought it back in the Senate again. So we're waiting for that to be heard. And in South Dakota, we were also working on a rescission bill, and we got that pretty far, but we lost that yesterday by 1 vote. So the rescission will not go through in South Dakota this year. But we'll keep coming back and trying.
So in those 2 states in particular, South Dakota and Montana, I know they're different states. In your mind, what is driving this? Is it the same element in both states that's working at the same time?
Yes, absolutely. It's Convention of the States. It's Mark Meckler's group. They hire paid lobbyists who are there working on the ground with the legislators. And then I don't know whether they pay them or not, but they have state coordinators and then local volunteers. And for months, they've been holding town halls. And so they get the great patriots, quite frankly. These are the Tea Party people. These are the good liberty-loving people who come to these town halls and hear it from one side. And the presentation is, this is the last thing we've got. This is the only and final way that we get a grip on Congress. And so good patriots say, well, we got to do something. Let's do it. If this is going to make a difference, let's do it. We have to do it. And they are adamant that anybody who would oppose this is crazy, but they've not heard our side of the story. And that's where we have failed, if you ask me, where we need to do a better job.
So you're relatively new in this territory, right? You're building this back from the ground up. I know it must be very daunting with all the money and all the manpower that they're expending on this. You've got all this four big state territory that you have to cover. So what's your plan for those 2 states particularly? How are you working on the ground to begin to push back?
Great question. Actually, Montana has always been very well maintained by coordinators, and I have to say that it is because of them that we did so well in holding it back so far. So there were primarily 2 legislators that were on the committee who had been through our Constitution as the Solution course before. We had them solidly grounded, and so that was the big help, and that was the work of the coordinators before me and our chapter members who had done that. And fortunately, I'd met with one of those new legislators just weeks before the session started and said, hey, will you give us a heads up if you hear anything? And he immediately notified us and let us know that it was in draft and it was coming, and we got to work immediately. So what we can do in the future is, this is not one once the bill is presented. This is not one by testimony. This is not one by enough emails being sent. This is one by our members understanding the issue, using our tools, going to their legislators and educating them, and making sure that they stand firm on principles. This is what's lacking. If anything I've learned from this is 80% of the legislators are like fish. They're flopping around from one side to the next, depending on who's talking to them. So the Mark Meckler crowd got to them. They're 100% convinced the Article 5 amendment process is the way to go. Then they talk to us and they say, oh yeah, okay, we see the dangers. Then the next time somebody from Convention of the States gets to them and they swing back over to that side. So it is our job to root our legislators, our representatives, in right principles so that they're not so easily swayed. They really understand this issue. There would be no sitting on the fence. This is what they all tell me. Oh, I'm sitting on the fence. I haven't decided yet. Well, what the heck are you doing in your state legislature and not knowing where you would stand on these issues?
So I know how complicated all of this is, but for our listeners, can you give us what's the one or two arguments on the side of the con that seems to sway people towards them? And what would be the two counter arguments on the JBS side, the Patriot side, that pulls them back? We just so people, anybody who is not thought about this or may end up going to one of these meetings in a state that doesn't have the con yet, what would you tell them to expect to hear from those trying to sway you? And what's the answer to that?
Great question. The biggest argument is that the Article 5 issue is that it was meant to rein in the federal government. No, it was not meant to rein in the federal government. It was meant to correct errors in the Constitution. What they're proposing in both of these states and in many others is a balanced budget amendment and a term limits amendment. That is not going to rein in the government. They don't understand how a balanced budget would work. In order to make it balanced, they don't only have to reduce expenses. They could also increase income, which is taxation. So, and also the most dangerous thing that it would do is that spending is already limited by the Constitution through the enumerated powers. So there already is a limit on them on how much they can spend. They're just not abiding by the Constitution. If they pass a balanced budget, they legitimize or legalize unconstitutional spending, and that is the greatest danger that we're facing. As far as the topic of the term limits, we already have term limits. It's called the ballot box. We can vote them out anytime we want to. The issue is, why are we not? And we're not because the voters are lacking in the knowledge of knowing who's a good representative and who's not. And that, again, is our job as the Birch Society. Most people in their desperation are looking for a fast magic wand that will solve all these problems right now. Let's just get this constitutional convention going. We knock them down. We tell them who's boss in the states, and we can go back to living our lives. It's not going to work that way. We got here by lack of understanding and knowledge and lack of teaching of our Constitution. And the only way we're going to get it back is a well-informed electorate body.
So give us, as far as you know it now, give us your predictions. I know it's hard to do. What's going to happen ultimately in these two states, Wyoming and South Dakota, Montana and South Dakota, and what can listeners do to help you?
Thank you. I think in Montana, if I have it calculated properly, it's going to fail in the Senate. That's the hope. But we're only a few votes away. It very often comes over 1 or 2 votes that we win or lose this. So the things that they can do is first be well educated enough to be able to call their representatives and say, hey, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And let me tell you why you're wrong on this. They can also send emails to all the legislators and say, please don't do this for these reasons. That's our job as Birchers. In South Dakota, I'm not so sure that we've got the votes to stop this in South Dakota. Montana has never actually successfully had an application for a con. South Dakota, it comes back every single year. Right. Never goes away.
Leah Southwell, it's a daunting task. We wish you Godspeed there, and you and the society, all this separating us from chaos. Thanks for your time today. I'm Dr. Duke with The New American, and joined again today by old friend Leah Southwell. Leah is a coordinator for the John Birch Society. Her territories include Colorado, parts of Montana, South Dakota, and Wyoming. Important places. Thanks for joining us today, Leah.
Thank you.
So the question, we had you on before. We talked about the con issue and why the con is perhaps one of the most important issues of our day, and what was going on in states like Wyoming and South Dakota, Montana and South Dakota, that were flirting with it. And so I think, a lively discussion. I want to ask you something related to that. Now, when people who are not born in that part of the country look at that part of the country, when we think about where Colorado is, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, inherently, these should be red states. And I know that the majority populations in these states are Republicans, if not conservatives. So what in the world's happening? How did we lose, seemingly impossibly lost Colorado for the long run? Montana had a smarmy Democrat governor up until the last election. What's going on in the heartland here that's causing some of these usually reliable states to go blue?
I would say in the case of Colorado, there was a true plan to take over Colorado. There was a lot of money involved in this battle. Now that this fraudulent election has taken place, we also know that Colorado is kind of the core of Dominion and has been used the Dominion machines for quite a while. So part of it was dirty campaigning, lots of money from the left, possibly voter fraud, but I think more importantly that ties all of the states together, probably throughout the United States, is the number of universities. Denver has, I believe, 20 plus universities in the city of Denver. So you're right, other than Denver and Boulder, Colorado is very much from the right. Very freedom-loving people.
I've been there many times. Colorado Springs is pretty left now. It used to not be, but and that's because of the university, right?
Yes, exactly.
And as a university professor, I mean, I smiled. Of course it is. I mean, the more universities, and so it's not an overly populated state, Colorado. It's not one of the huge population states, but boy, if you've got 20 universities in Denver alone, I mean, it sounds like the ratio between citizen and college is really, really high.
Yeah, so they're bringing in a lot of outsiders to the schools here, and then they stay in Colorado. You'll find the same thing in Montana. Missoula and Billings are mostly to the left, and those are the cities where the universities are. Wyoming, I think, is a little bit of a different reason. It's money. So is Montana, is money. So a lot of the outsiders are the people with lots of money coming into the areas of Bozeman, Big Sky, Montana, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and these people are bringing their leftist views, but they've got the money to support people like Liz Cheney in Wyoming.
So sticking with California.
Yeah, I was going to say money and one other issue, and that's Wyoming is an energy state. And so there's a lot of dirty politics. It's all about keeping the energy and controlling the energy.
I was going to ask you before we left Colorado, which is pretty much a lost cause now in some respects. I want to ask you, the follow-up question I want to ask you is there any way to win it back? But right now, I wanted to ask you, to what degree did the cannabis legislation, all of that, create a larger Democrat constituency? I'm surprised when you listed the major things, you didn't list that. Is that not a big deal there, as big deal as we have been led to believe?
No, I think it definitely was a big deal, and they're still here. And I'm actually hoping that the legislation may pass in other states and they'll go to the other states instead of all congregating in Colorado. Maybe if they do go away back to their own state, we stand a chance of restoring Colorado. I'm not given up hope on Colorado. I think that we can still restore it. I think the good people were blindsided. It happened so quickly and so unexpectedly. And the legislators that I've spoken to here in Colorado, they are the most defeated people I've ever seen. They just don't have any faith that there's anything that they can do to stop this in Colorado. So I think with the help of good citizens who give them the courage to keep on fighting, I think that Colorado could be taken back. That's my intent. That's why I chose to be here. here.
And of course, the key is to not letting what's happening in Colorado to spread to the neighboring states. So you mentioned Montana, and the former governor. I see this all the time. You fly when I fly in to give talks in Idaho. Here's what happens: you have all sorts of non-Idahoans, Californians coming in, right, bringing money and running away from their own created disasters to vote in it again in places like Idaho. And then, of course, you have a lot of Republicans who are really Democrats. They can't run as Democrats because they'll never get elected. So they adopt the Republican mantra. They put an R before their name. 95% of their policy is Democrat policy, but they have one issue on which they tout their conservative bona fides, and they keep getting reelected. And what happens then, as the numbers begin to tilt, you find out that the legislature really wasn't dominated by Republicans. And when those Democrats hiding as Republicans smell the change in the air, their true colors come out. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, and that is definitely the case in Wyoming, Montana, and South Dakota. And I'm from Idaho, and yes, that's what happens in Idaho too. If you don't stand a chance of getting elected as a Democrat, then you run as a Republican. So really, it is not a Republican state, not as much as you think it would be. I would say Wyoming and Montana still very much lean towards the right. South Dakota, I think, is losing it.
Well, watching the citizen patriots of Wyoming really go after Liz Cheney and the repulsive way the establishment Republicans saved her. Isn't it amazing that you got to basically banish a kooky congresswoman from Florida, take her off all her committees because the Democrats tell you to? But when you got somebody as disruptive as Liz Cheney, everybody circles the wagons. That's why the Republican Party, I hate to say it, and the John Birch Society knows it, don't put your faith in the Republican Party. Put your faith in organizations like the John Birch Society. But talk a little bit quickly about the Cheney situation in Wyoming. And I didn't know before the show you told me, I didn't realize to what degree Wyoming was an energy state. And that makes a big difference there.
Yeah. I'm sorry, what was the first question?
Basically, tell me more about the circumstances of Liz Cheney in Wyoming. Seems like a no-brainer that she shouldn't be there, that the Republicans will probably try to oust her. But how did she get there to begin with? Why was she tolerated with these unorthodox Republican views?
Well, she wasn't really even from Wyoming. Her father, Cheney, wasn't really either. They may have had a ranch here for years, and that was their only connection, but they didn't really have any loyalties to Wyoming. It's just an easy state to win. It's the lowest population state in the nation, and so it was an easy place to win, and the name was familiar there. So I think she won purely based on money. Wasn't the support of the people in the first place that she won, and so she wasn't trusted. She wasn't one of them. And the people never particularly liked her. But yeah, now there's super big backlash. And thankfully, I think a pretty good man is standing up, Bouchard, to run against her, and he will get the support of the people. I think there's a recall happening, although I don't know if it's legal in Wyoming, if they actually can recall her. But this is a good thing to see. I think we have freedom when our representatives fear us, and we have tyranny when we fear them.
Amen.
I think Liz Cheney's has become quite fearful.
That's good. And I mean, another thing that I think you got to help enlighten me a little bit, and watching the COVID situation play out, all I think any of us know about Governor Noem in South Dakota is that she does seem to have been an outspoken absolutist on freedom when it comes to lockdowns. But there's more to the story. As somebody who works South Dakota as part of your job, what's going on in South Dakota? What do people need to know about the governor?
I don't know her personally. This is just what I've heard from the people of South Dakota, is that was the pressure from the legislature that forced her to take that stand. And then once she saw that she became quite popular by it, then she decided to adopt it. But she's not nearly as liberty loving as she appears to be to the rest. I've also heard quite a bit of lots of new people moving to South Dakota and then finding out that there actually are some mask mandates, and they're hopping mad over it, that they invested and moved to South Dakota to find out that it's not as free as they thought it would be.
So what we hear in the news, that absolutism doesn't necessarily play out in her own state. I wonder why. You would think that the media would want to destroy her for that stance. Why are they not pointing out that in other parts of the state, and the governor herself is responsible, or at least allowing certain restrictions?
Maybe she's not a threat enough yet for them to try to take her down. It's my only explanation.
On the national scene, if she starts to get
And maybe if they know that she's actually more of a neocon type, maybe she would be wonderful to run for further offices because the rest of the country thinks that she's this great liberty-loving person. So she'd be fantastic to run.
Interesting. Well, in the 15 seconds we have left, please let people know how they can access you and what your work is all about.
They can access me through the John Birch Society website as the coordinator for these states. And I would just suggest, if you're not a member of the Birch Society, please join now and help us.
Leah Southwell, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.